Close your eyes. Get comfortable in your distraction-free environment, or as best as you can find. We're going to talk about bad days and how they don't really exist. That's what we're going to meditate on today. We'll begin by closing our eyes, taking 3 super deep, super slow, long breaths. As you continue with these breaths, pay attention to all the different sensations that accompany these breaths. Some people like to focus in one place, others prefer an open awareness. Perhaps you're new to this, and this is an exploration, an experiment for you. It's all good. What's important is that we're here together, making this intentional time to meditate. When you're done with your 3 deep, long breaths, you can either continue that rhythm or return to a more ordinary rhythm of breathing. So, bad days. Everyone talks about bad days without even thinking about what that really means. What amount of bad moments must you have in order to say that you have had a bad day? Consider that for a moment. What amount of bad moments must you have in order to consider that you're having a bad day? Has it been the same number of bad moments every time you've had a bad day? Probably not. When I think back to times when I would have described myself as having a bad day, I had no idea how many moments constituted a bad day. And I would be very surprised if it was ever the same amount of moments that led to that announcement. I'm having a bad day. The problem with this, of course, is that selective focus from that moment on looks for confirmation that you are indeed having a bad day. So, we need an antidote to this. And the antidote is precisely to realize, to see clearly in your own experience that there's only ever one moment. When you think of the past right now, that's thinking. When you think of the future right now, that's also thinking. These are mental processes that you're running in the present moment. The eternal now, as it's called in some of the spiritual literature. But in your direct experience, this is all that is ever happening. This is what I mean when I say it's impossible to have a bad day. When you say you're having a bad day, you're making an interpretation. You're looking out across your memory of the past and saying, I recognize a pattern of things that I wish had gone differently, things that I didn't like. The bus was late. My hair looks terrible today. I took the wrong coat. My boss is making unreasonable demands. Someone ate my sandwich. Of course, worse things than this can happen. If we take it all the way, perhaps someone close to us is diagnosed with terminal illness. Perhaps we ourselves are diagnosed with terminal illness. Well, what then? Are we going to have a succession of bad days until we finally die? That doesn't sound good. Each of these experiences is discrete. It is its own event, which only has as much impact on the following event as you allow. In other words, if you hold on to one experience and take it with you into the next experience, if you hold on to one moment, God, this is shit. This is so shit. I'm having such a bad day. You bring that with you into the next moment, then that colours the next moment as opposed to approaching it freshly. Now, let's take that example of an encounter with your boss. If you begin that encounter feeling like you're having a bad day, convinced that you're having a bad day, well, how is that for a beginning to a social interaction? It's not the best. Not the best. But if you come freshly, okay, yes, I just got a soaking in the rain. Yes, I brought the wrong coat today. Should have looked at the weather forecast. But now I'm wet. That's how it is. And it's time to go and see my boss. What does my boss want? And this is an interesting example because unless your boss is entirely ignorant, which I'm told some bosses are, they're very likely to notice if you turn up in that moment ready to serve, even though you're soaked to the bone. So now instead of that encounter being predisposed or that you turn up to that encounter predisposed to the idea that you're having a bad day, and now, what's my boss going to ask of me now? Perhaps even running through your mind all of the unreasonable requests that your boss has made in the past. If you turn up to serve, you're actually likely to receive kindness from any reasonable person in that circumstance. But if you turn up flustered, if you turn up stressed, if you turn up having a bad day, look, maybe you'll receive some compassion in that circumstance as well. Depends on your boss. But our day is gonna go better if we turn up with no preconception in each moment. Just ready to have a new moment with no label attached to it. The moment we say that we're having a bad day, that selective focus is activated and is going to be looking out for confirmation of your judgment that you're having a bad day. And so my recommendation is this: precisely as we do in sitting meditation, simply be here now. Acknowledge that the past and future are figments of your imagination and nothing more. Pay attention to what's going on right now. The sensations of having been soaked in the rain are a very different thing to the experience of cursing the fact that you were caught in the rain. The sensations of having been caught in the rain, the sensations of having wet clothes on, are a different thing to cursing the fact that you were caught in the rain. When you're having a bad day, you're likely to be cursing the fact that you were caught in the rain. Essentially, when you're in that mode of having a bad day, you're bringing with you a kind of cursing of all of your experiences that have taken place in that day. Also, when you're determined that you're having a bad day, if a good experience sneaks in, you're less open to that because it contests this idea that you're running on, that you're having a bad day. So the game is, if and when you catch yourself having a bad day, is to do precisely what we do here in meditation. Is to come back, in a way of speaking, to the present moment, although really we never leave it. It's impossible to do so. Maybe you use the breath as an anchor. Maybe you use a mantra or some other technique. And you acknowledge and re-acknowledge and re-acknowledge and re-acknowledge as many times as is necessary that this right now is all that's happening. So there really is no bad day. Even to call a moment a bad moment is just an interpretation. All there really is sensation. Then comes the labeling, the judging, the describing. So this is my recommendation to you, friend. If and when you catch yourself having a bad day, remember, first of all, it's only a bad moment at the very worst, and that even that is a judgment, an interpretation. Then rest naturally, without seeking or describing anything. Accept everything about that moment just as it is. Because even in the case that you yourself are diagnosed with terminal illness, to accept that diagnosis is your best course of action. To resist it is only to cause yourself more pain. To accept it is the beginning of being able to respond wisely, as opposed to reacting in resistance. So please continue to contemplate this in your meditation for as long as you please, and maybe leave a comment to let me know your reflections.